Once a devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, "What is the method of practice?" Bhagwan said, "As the self of a person who tries to attain self realization is not different from him, and as there is nothing other or superior to him to be attained by him, self realization being only the realization of one's own nature, the seeker of liberation realizes, without doubts or misconceptions, his real nature by distinguishing the eternal from the transient and never swerves from his natural state. This is known as the practice of knowledge. This is the inquiry leading to self realization." Devotee asks, "Can this path of inquiry be followed by all aspirants?" Bhagwan said, "This is suitable only for the ripe souls. The rest should follow different methods according to the state of their minds." Devotee asked, "What are the other methods?" Bhagwan said, "They are stuti, japa, dhyana, yoga, jnana, and so forth. Stuti is singing the praises of the Lord with a great feeling of devotion. Japa is uttering the names of the gods or sacred mantras like Om, either mentally or verbally. While following the methods of stuti and japa, the mind will sometimes be concentrated and sometimes diffused. The vagaries of the mind will not be evident to those who follow these methods. Dhyana denotes the repetition of the names, etc., mentally, japa, with feeling of devotion. In this method, the state of the mind will be understood easily, for the mind doesn't become concentrated and diffused simultaneously. When one is in dhyana, it doesn't contact the object of the senses, and when it is in contact with the objects, it is not in dhyana. Therefore, those who are in this state can observe the vagaries of the mind then and there, and by stopping the mind from thinking other thoughts, fix it in dhyana. Perfection in dhyana is the state of abiding in the self. As meditation functions in an exceedingly subtle manner at the source of the mind, it is not difficult to perceive its rises and subsidence. Yoga, the source of the breath, is the same as that of the mind. Therefore, the subsidence of either leads effortlessly to that of the other. The practice of stilling the mind through breath control is called yoga. Fixing their minds on psychic centers such as the Sahasrara, the thousand petaled lotus, yogis remain any length of time without awareness of their bodies. As long as this state continues, they appear to be immersed in some kind of joy. But when the mind, which has become tranquil, emerges, become active again, it resumes its worldly thoughts. It is therefore necessary to train it with the help of practices like dhyana. Whenever it becomes externalized, it will then attain a state in which there is neither subsidence nor emergence. Jnana is the annihilation of the mind, in which it is made to assume the form of the self through the constant practice of dhyana or inquiry. Vichara, the extension of the mind, is the state in which there is a cessation of all efforts. Those who are established in the state never swerve from their true state. The terms silence and inaction refer to this state alone. All practices are followed only with the object of concentrating the mind, as all the mental activities like remembering, forgetting, desiring, hating, attracting, discarding, etc., are modifications of the mind, they cannot be one's true state. Simple, changeless being is one's true nature. Therefore, to know the truth of one's being and to be, it is known as release from bondage and the destruction of the note, Granthi, Nasam. Until this state of tranquility of mind is firmly attained, the practice of unswerving abidance in the self and keeping the mind unsoiled by various thoughts is essential for an aspirant. Although the practices for achieving strength of mind are numerous, all of them achieve the same end. For it can be seen that whoever concentrates his mind or any object will, on the cessation of all mental concepts, ultimately remain merely as that object. This is called successful meditation, dhyana siddhi. Those who follow the path of inquiry realizes that the mind which remains at the end of the inquiry is Brahman. Those who practice meditation realize that the mind which remains at the end of the meditation is the object of their meditation, as the result is the same in either case. It is the duty of aspirants to practice continuously either of these methods till the goal is reached. Devotee asks, is the state of being still a state involving effort or effortless? Bhagwan said, it is not an effortless state of indolence. All mundane activities which are ordinarily called efforts are performed with the aid of a portion of the mind and with frequent breaks, but the act of communion with the self, Atma, or remaining still inwardly is intense activity which is performed with the entire mind and without break. Devotee asked, what is the nature of Maya? Bhagwan said, Maya is that which makes us regard as non existent the self, the reality which is always and everywhere present and all pervasive and self luminous, and as existent the individual soul, Jiva, the world, Jagat, and God, Para, which have been conclusively proved to be non existent at all times and places. Devotee asked, as the self shines fully of its own accord, why is it not generally recognized like the other objects of the world by all persons? Bhagwan said, wherever particular objects are known, it is the self which has known itself is the form of those objects. For what is known as knowledge or awareness is only the potency of the self, Atma Shakti. The self is the only sentient object. There is nothing apart from the self. If there are such objects, they are all insentient and therefore cannot either know themselves or mutually know one another. It is because the self doesn't know its true nature in this manner that it seems to be immersed and struggling in the ocean of birth or death in the form of the individual soul. Devotee asked, although the Lord is all pervasive, it appears from passages like adorning him through his grace, and he can be known only through his grace. How then can the individual soul by its own efforts attain self realization in absence of the Lord's grace? Bhagwan said, as the Lord denotes the self and as grace means the Lord's presence or revelation, there is no time when the Lord remains unknown. If the light of the sun is invisible to the owl, it is only the fault of the bird. not of the sun. Similarly, can the unawareness by ignorant persons of the self, which is always of the nature of awareness, be other than their own fault? How can it be the fault of the self? It is because grace is of the very nature of the Lord that He is well known as the blessed grace. Therefore, the Lord, whose nature itself is grace, doesn't have to bestow His grace, nor is there any particular time for bestowing His grace. Devotee asks, what part of the body is the abode of the self? Bhagwan said, the heart on the right side of the chest is generally indicated. This is because we usually point to the right side of the chest when we refer to ourselves. Some say that the Sahasra, the 1,000-petaled lotus, is the abode of the self, but if that were true, the head should not fall forward when we go to sleep or faint. Devotee asked, what is the nature of the heart? Bhagwan said, the sacred text describing it says, between the two nipples, below the chest and above the abdomen, there are 6 organs of different colors, one of them resembling the bud of a water lily, and situated 2 digits to the right is the heart. It is inverted, and within it is a tiny orifice, which is the seat of dense darkness, ignorance, full of desires. All the psychic nerves, nadis, depend upon it. It is the abode of the vital forces, the mind and the light of consciousness. But although it is described as the meaning of the word heart is the self, Atma, as it is denoted by the terms existence, consciousness, bliss, eternal, and plenum, Sachit, Anandam, Nityam, Purnam. It has no differences such as exterior and interior or up and down. The tranquil state in which all thoughts come to an end is called the state of the self. When it is realizes as it is, there is no scope for discussions about the location inside the body or outside. Devotee asked, why do thoughts of many objects arise in the mind even when there is no contact with external objects? Bhagwan said, all such thoughts are due to latent tendencies. They appear only to the individual consciousness, jiva, which has forgotten its real nature and become externalized. Whenever particular things are perceived, the inquiry, who is it that sees them, should be made. They will then disappear at once. Devotee asked, how do the triple factors, knower, known, and knowledge, Bhagwan, which are absent in deep sleep, samadhi, etc., manifest themselves in the self in the state of waking and dreaming? Bhagwan said, from the self there arise in succession Chidakasha, reflected consciousness, which is a kind of luminosity, Jiva, the individual consciousness, or the seer, or the first concept, phenomena, that is the world. Devotee asks, since the self is free from the notions of knowledge and ignorance, how can it be said to pervade the entire body in the shape of sentences or to impart sentience to the senses? Bhagwan said, wise men say that there is a connection between the source of the various psychic nerves and the self, that this is the note of the heart, that the connection between the sentient and insentient will exist until this is cut asunder with the aid of the true knowledge that just as the subtle and invisible force of electricity travels through wires and does many wondrous things, so the force of the self also travels through the psychic nerves and pervading the entire body, imparts sentience to the senses, and that if this note is cut, the self will remain as it always is without any attributes.